He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
All right, Merry Christmas again, everyone. We continue our series of interviews this week with Josh Hammer. He's a Newsweek podcaster and one of the brightest young conservatives who are out there. I don't think most of my guests have been younger than I've been or than I am. I think Emma Jo might be the only one thus far. But he's a bright young guy. He's a new dad also. We get into some of that, and he explains who he thinks are the best cabinet picks for Trump, why NATO is a big problem, and the high-stakes dance Trump is going to do with regard to the Abraham Accords. There's one country he singled out as perhaps being a linchpin to that really going perfectly. And he's just a deeply intellectual guy who I think has got his head in the right place and is a good conversationalist as well. This is the interview with Josh Hammer. All right. I think Josh Hammer is one of the most interesting young conservatives out there. He's also very prolific. He's got a couple of podcasts, The Josh Hammer Show, which is a Newsweek podcast, America on Trial. He's got a legal show, and he's got a new book coming out in a couple months. And I'll remind you this. I'll have him back on when the book's out. Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation and the Destiny of the West. But Josh, I want to start with the biggest news that we could talk about, which is family. You are a new dad as of about a week. This is one of the running themes on this show as I'm constantly talking about my family life, because there's nothing else other than work for me pretty much at this time. I did play golf over the weekend. So you in the audience want to keep tabs on that. It did happening once every 3-4 months these days. But I've got a bunch of children. You're new at it. How's it going so far?
Well, Alex, great to join you. I appreciate the invitation to join your excellent show there. Look, it still feels kind of surreal, honestly, the whole fatherhood thing. And I think part of the reason that it feels surreal is because the newborn, our daughter in her young, week and a half, 2-week-old state is so attached to the mother. I mean, people know that the mother is the one who has the physical changes and the crazy hormones and the stomach protruding, all that during pregnancy. But I mean, they don't really teach you in school, so to speak, just how much I think the newborn is really attached to the mother when it comes to breastfeeding. I mean, the literal scent of the mother. The baby at first still thinks that he or she is in the womb, right? So, I mean, things like that. I mean, so I say all that because there's only so much realistically that the father can actually do really in the early stage. But having said that, Alex, the first time that I held my daughter there in the hospital, I mean, literal life-changing experience. I mean, that's not hyperbole, right? I mean, no, of course not. I mean, tears flowing down the face. I mean, my God. I mean, what am I here for if not for this? I mean, literally, what am I here for if not to teach to my children that which I think she should learn and that which her generation will learn, her generation of Americans, of this and that there. So it's just beautiful. It is a truly, truly formative thing. And, thank God, because I've been blessed with so much, and my wife and I are off to a great start here in Florida.
Yeah, I recommend having as many as you can. It's funny because you already wrote an essay. Did I see it in the American Spectator? Where did I see it? Okay, so it was in the American Spectator. You have written an essay. I'm hearing it already, even though you're brand new at it. And it's funny because it feels like new parents always feel compelled to evangelize about how great it is when we're so new at it. I had a very funny experience when I had my first son, who was 11 months old, and Dennis Prager was talking about parenthood on one of his happiness hours or ultimate issues hours or one of those things. And I just called in as a caller to talk about it. And I'd been on the show as a guest at that point, but it is because I've known Dennis at this point for a while, but I felt compelled to call in and say, it's really great. Everyone should have 1 million kids. And Dennis, as he does, he plays devil's advocate and he pushed back and said, well, what about all the kids that cause their parents great distress? And I was like, well, I don't know anything about that. I've only got one. He's 11 months old. And I said, I'm still going to roll the dice and I'm going to say I have a bunch of kids. And I'm trying to make good on it. We're up to 4 over here at the Marlow household. Wow. And it is, every day is a blessing. It really is. The highs are so high. The lows are low, I'll say, when you got 4. Sometimes it does feel like, why are we doing this? But most moments are very good. So I think you're in store for a lot of fun and a lot of meaning. But what you said is really why I talk about it. Is because if we don't have children and if we're not thinking about them, then how much skin do we really have in the game? And there are wonderful people, decent people who can't have children or don't have children, and that's not how their life works out. And they are of such high moral character that it doesn't really compromise how they live their lives. That's not everyone. And really the best thing for you to become mature and to become a fully formed citizen is to have a family. And it's kind of the biggest thing. And we talk about it, in the first 6 months after you become a dad, maybe write an essay, and then that's it. And then we just drop it. And I don't get it. I don't understand it. It seems like an elephant in the room here.
Yeah, there's lots to unpack there, obviously. But first of all, you mentioned Dennis Prager and being a father, which cannot help but bring a smile to my face because Dennis's son David actually lives near me in Florida. I know him a bit through the Jewish community here in Florida. So David is a wonderful man. So I think Dennis Prager, I must say from afar, did a fantastic job of fathering David, and I presume David's siblings as well. There, look, we're only at one here in the Hammer household, so we've got some catching up to do to get to the Marlow household's prolific stature. But my wife and I are definitely going to keep on trying, God willing, and I guess we'll see what happens. My brother-in-law, my wife's oldest brother, is very religious, lives over in Israel. He actually had 4 kids in 4 years. I think they're taking a brief break right now, but they're probably going to keep on going. Did you have any twins
in there? Because sometimes that's how it happens. Is that I had a buddy who tried to go back to back, and then he got 3 under like 18 months, and just like, oh wow, that's wild.
No twins. No twins, actually.
Wow.
I mean, twins, more bang for your buck. Probably, be careful what you ask for. I'm sure it's very difficult, obviously, to raise twins, but, more bang for your buck, certainly from the mother's perspective when it comes to all the bodily changes and the pregnancy and all this and all that there. But look, fundamentally, Alex, the way that I think about this, and I touched on this in my syndicated column, which was up at the American Spectator and Newsweek, a bunch of other places, Town Hall and so forth there. To me, this gets to the broader idea of intergenerational transmission. I'm a conservative, right? So I'm a research fellow at the Edmund Burke Foundation. That's the national conservatism thing with Yoram Hazony, my good friend there. And I think a lot about Edmund Burke and what is conservatism. Well, Burke famously thinks of the nation state as an intergenerational compact between the dead, the living, and the yet unborn. Well, what is the dots that connect the dead, the living, and the yet unborn? Well, it's parenting. It's being a father, it's being a mother, it's having children. It's actually perpetuating your society. It's actually perpetuating your civilization there. So to your point about having skin in the game, a lot of people were making fun of J.D. Vance, after Donald Trump selected him as his running mate. And, the joke's on them because J.D. Vance ended up being a tremendous asset to this ticket. He's going to be a fantastic vice president of the United States. I've known J.D. for years, consider him a friend there. But, the point that J.D. was making about this completely taken out of context, childless cat ladies thing that they were going on about this for a week or two there, the point was what you're saying is that, it actually is important to have some sort of skin in the game because, again, that is the Burkean conception of a nation in the first place there. If you care about your nation, you have to care about this intergenerational transmission chain there, whether it's in a religious context or just a secular national context. In an American context, that means going back to the founding generation there. You want to perpetuate this great experiment in order liberty. Well, at some point, I'm not saying that everyone necessarily, every single person, I'm not saying that you're a bad person if you have XYZ reason for not having kids there. That's not my claim, obviously. I don't want this to be taken out of context. But if you really want to maximize your ROI, your return on investment for being a great American patriot there, at some point you probably should have some form of direct skin in the game and then try to actually parent some children there to try to be the next great generation of American statesmen, God willing.
Yeah, and I think that this is on we're talking macro. On a micro level, many wonderful people can't have kids, don't choose to have kids. Some people, look, I'm friends with Ann Coulter. She's told me her whole life that she never wanted to have kids, never meant to have kids, and you totally buy it. You spend time with her, and you feel like, I get it. I see it. I'm not saying it's for everyone. I'm just saying that overall, as a macro level, the emphasis needs to be put on it. So what can we be doing as a society from your vantage point? I know you've been giving this some thought, is because it's tough now. It's a grind to have lots of children. It's very expensive. We're getting increasingly secular where there isn't, I think, that constant reassurance and encouragement that this is the right thing to do. What do you feel like we can be doing at a macro level?
So a few things come immediately to mind. Look, the first thing from a most kind of policy wonk-ish perspective. So I'm one of the people that has spent some time over in Hungary over the past few years. I spoke at a conference there in 2022, as well as CPAC Hungary in 2023. I've actually met Prime Minister Orban numerous times there, and I have given some level of study to the way that Hungary, for instance, has shaped their tax code to be a much more family-friendly place. It's actually very interesting. Literally, when you arrive at the airport in Budapest, Hungary, when you're actually there in like literally walking to the airport terminal from the plane, the very first thing you see on the walls is "Welcome to family-friendly Hungary," and you know they actually put their money where their mouth is when it comes to their tax code. There, the entire tax code is structured towards rewarding and incentivizing parenthood, towards having more children. If you have 3 or 4 children, I think you get all property taxes written off for the rest of your life or something crazy like that. There's all sorts of ways that I think that you can structure your tax code. And you know, I think some of our more libertarian-minded friends might say that is so-called quote-unquote social engineering, that you shouldn't be trying to structure the tax code in order to try to achieve X, Y, Z ends. To me, I mean, this gets to the whole point as to why we have a tax code in the first place. We literally have a tax code to support a general welfare, to support a community, to support a nation state, to support a group of people that are dedicated, again, in this intergenerational transmission and trying to preserve our great American experiment in order to liberty. So, I mean, some sort of economic policy, I think, definitely should be oriented towards more family-friendly means. Again, that's going to make some libertarians wince, but it probably has to be done.
But this is very, very important, because here's what happens, and this is just I don't want to sound like a victim or anything like that, so I'm always cautious of this, but I do well. I'm not a rich person by any means, but I'm a good contributor to the economy, and the government makes a lot of money from that. So I pay boatloads in taxes, and my wife is a community cancer doctor. So she heals people who are in the community who are suffering from cancer, and it's a very long road and doesn't pay well for a very long time to get there. And the first, quarter of what we make, 20%, goes to childcare, and maybe more. And that is so that I can continue, even if you don't like my career. I mean, people in this audience like my career, but even if you're a troll on the left listening and you think that everything I stand for is horrible, I'm at least contributing to the tax base in a major way. And my wife is objectively doing good stuff for the community. And we are, society is very tough on us because we don't qualify for most of the tax write-offs. We don't get the coronavirus stimulus checks. We don't get any of that stuff. But we do feed the economy by all the mouths we have to feed, by the additional help we need around the house so that we can do our jobs. Can we not talk about this? Or is this something that we can talk about? That maybe there should be some things to want to encourage the engine. My family is a high horsepower engine, and people benefit from that. It's not if you're on the left, you work at, a Crew or Media Matters and you're not happy I exist. But everyone else, I'm contributing financially. She's contributing both financially and on a broader keeping the society healthy, just in terms of how she's spending her time. Can we be thought of at all? Or because we make more than $100,000 a year, we can't be discussed? Like, is that it?
I think that your family is a great example as to someone who should benefit no matter what your combined income of your household is. I mean, you should benefit in some meaningful way from having 4 children. I mean, Alex, you and your household are contributing to the perpetuation of this great American experiment. I happen to broadly agree, obviously, with your politics, so I'm maybe a little biased there. But the point is that even if you're not, as you said, you're contributing to the economy and you're raising the next generation of American citizens there. Yeah. And to me, it doesn't really matter whether or not you're below some certain arbitrary income threshold there. You're trying to reward good behavior because it is good behavior there, right? You know, this kind of this dichotomy, this notion that the tax code should be structured towards trying to incentivize good and to disincentivize harm. This is literally ancient political theory. I mean, you can go back as far as the Platonic dialogues and the whole notion of trying to reward friends and punish enemies, a notion that has been totally misconstrued by Carl Schmitt and various 20th century thinkers there. Yeah. But this whole notion of trying to use various means to try to do good and to disincentivize harm goes back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And modern tax codes are a perfectly suitable means to try to achieve those ends. It is not quote unquote social engineering there. It's literally just good old fashioned common sense as I try to think of it there. So, that is definitely one thing that I think our country should be doing much more of when it comes to trying to get more people to marry young, to have more kids and so forth there. But look, I mean, fundamentally, what I concluded my column with, which you kindly cited and referenced there, is that the number one reason that people, I think, do not marry and or do not have kids is because they're pessimistic about the country's future. Fundamentally, if you are happy, if you're optimistic about the country's future there, you're going to want to shack up. You're going to want to bring kids. Again, it's just logical. If you're sad and you think this country's going to hell in a handbasket, why would you want to bring
kids into it?
Exactly. Exactly right. So that gets back to education policy, too, because, again, the school systems in America there are teaching people that this country is racist and sexist and evil and terrible there. So we got to get back to basic civics. I mean, get rid of the woke stuff, obviously, there, but just try to have some basic schoolhouse rock style. I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill, all that stuff to remind people that, no, actually, America is very good. Actually, our Constitution is fantastic. Our form of government is wonderful. Our founding fathers were geniuses. Try to read the Federalist Papers again. I mean, just basic stuff like that, honestly, I think just as much as the economic policy, arguably even more so, I think could do a ton of work in trying to get more people to marry young and to have more kids.
January 20th is the day, and Washington, D.C. is the place. That's when and where Donald Trump will be inaugurated as the 47th president of the United States. He gets a whole new inauguration. It was already 45th. Now it'll be 47. And we want to send you there. You can win a once-in-a-lifetime VIP experience to attend the inauguration in Washington, D.C. It includes airfare for you and a guest to Washington, a 3-night stay in our nation's capital, tickets for the presidential inauguration, and much more. Don't miss this historic opportunity to celebrate the greatness, the history, the excitement of a presidential inauguration. To enter, you see the link in the show notes for this episode or go to SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump. Guys, I've said that this is the marquee event on anyone's social calendar for the year, really for the decade for most people. And you get a chance to go. I don't see why you wouldn't give it a shot. Salem Podcast Network/Trump. All you got to do, and you'll get your name on the list. And let's see if you can win. I hope you do. Yeah, so many good points in there. The one, though, I do want to put a button on is that should be structuring society to incentivize good behavior, and instead we're, in many cases, incentivizing bad behavior. You earn less, so you get a better rate on your taxes is actually, I understand it, of course, by a necessity basis, but it's not encouraging people to thrive. And I think that's why I'm calling for right here. We now need a regressive tax code. The tax code now needs to go down the richer you get. That's it. Revolutionary idea. We'll let Media Matters determine how tongue-in-cheek I'm being with that. Josh, I want to ask you about something because you mentioned our founders, and I ride for our founders. And I was thinking about, do you think, because you're a big part of the conservative ecosystem, do you think that we on the right now are getting too hypercritical of America? Because I like a healthy skepticism of everything, but are we just nitpicking ourselves to death right now? Because it feels like the right is becoming more fashionable to just announce that actually America's not that great. Because I only cite this not to say that I enjoy compelling debate and conversation and all the long podcasts that cover some of this stuff. It's all interesting. But ultimately, we want people to feel optimistic about the future of this country, or else we're not going to have kids and we're going to lose the country. So do you feel like we're at a healthy level now, or do we feel like we could be tilting into we're just kind of looking back through our history and trying to nitpick bad stuff?
So this is a very important question. So there are two things going on here, I think. On the one hand, you obviously have the crazy left, the Black Lives Matter left, the 1619 Project left. I mean, that speaks for itself. I mean, those people actually hate America because they ultimately hate Western civilization. I mean, as Students for Justice in Palestine at Columbia University has explicitly said, they are actually trying to tear down all that we today call Western civilization. So,
and as I've said before on the broadcast, when I was at Berkeley, it was going on 20 years ago, that was the most powerful left-wing club with the Students for Justice in Palestine. I always thought they were funded by Hamas, and it was some sort of a big op. And it's just really interesting. Very powerful entity on campus, unfortunately.
For sure. And they have way too much power. They're also facing some sort of new lawsuit in Virginia, if memory serves now, about their funding ties to Hamas and various under Hamas-connected entities there. So it'll be very interesting to see how that particular lawsuit plays out. So you definitely have the crazies on the left there. But if I may, I do want to say that I do think that there are some people on the right. I'm not going to name names. I don't feel a need to do that. But I think that there are some people on the right who have become a little too critical of America. And to me, some of these folks are making somewhat of an analytical error. They're making somewhat of a category error. So I, for one, have been deeply, deeply critical of what I refer to, borrowing from the late great Angelo Codevilla, I frequently criticize America's ruling class, America's ruling elites. They're the people that come up through the trusted gatekeepers, through the institutions. They subscribe to a monolithic ideology. It's the ideology, Alex, that you and I are familiar with there. It's the ideology at all the elite universities, at the big tech firms and the major media firms in Hollywood, Silicon Valley, and so forth there. They all seem to come from a certain milieu, and they all arrive at very similar conclusions there. However, I think some people tend to make a category error when you get so over the top critical of this ruling class that is deserving of a lot of ire. Then you kind of perhaps accidentally or perhaps deliberately then take the next step and then conflating America's ruling class with America itself. And this I think is a category error where I think you have some people that are so hypercritical of the way that America has been generally misruled by both parties, Republican and Democrat alike, for 50, 60, 70 years, for large swaths, frankly, of the post-World War II era. But then it's another step to say, oh, you know what? Actually, it's not just the ruling class, but America itself is bad. America is actually a force for bad on the world stage. In this case, maybe we should be more comfortable with foreign policies that empowered the communist Chinese. Maybe TikTok's actually not so bad there. So I do see some people, even on our own side, tend to make this category error. I think it is typically starting in a place that I share, which is profound skepticism, indeed outright animus of the way that our ruling class has misled us for so long. But the key, though, is stopping right there and not taking it further, because America, again, as we just discussed, is actually quite good at its core.
Yeah, and it just, a lot of it for me is time management, and again, it's the 4 kids and the 3 jobs I got to have to make sure everything gets done. And it's I just don't know. Do I really want to go and just try to debunk people who are fans of Ronald Reagan right now? Is that how I want to spend time right now? It's not. I'll tell you flat out, it's not. And I don't like the amnesty that he did, but I need to go back and just maybe Reagan wasn't so great. Okay, come on. We got 20% of the country likes that Luigi Mangione shot someone dead in the street in his back. Can we focus on those people first before we go back and police Reagan? Just a thought, and maybe people can take that for what they will. Josh, let's talk about the transition. So I imagine you like most of the picks. Are there any highlights for you? Are there any people that stand out to you as you really feel like a place where we can do a lot of good?
Yeah, so I love a bunch of the picks. There are some really fantastic picks there. I mean, Alex, one of the fun things when our side, so to speak, wins is that you see personal friends, people that you've literally been
that is fun.
I mean, you see people that you've literally been in the trenches with, get tapped to very important positions. So to give just one example, my longtime good friend Will Scharf. I mean, Will and I literally co-founded a very trolly group a year and a half ago called Jews Against Soros. I mean, Will's going to be the White House staff secretary. That's a very important position. It's basically kind of the hub and spoke of the White House. I mean, that's actually it's basically the role that Brett Kavanaugh played actually in the George W. Bush administration there. So, I mean, that for one has been very fun to see just very good people get tapped for very, very important roles. Just this past weekend, actually, my buddy Aaron Reitz was tapped to lead the DOJ's Office of Legal Policy. Very, very important role in the DOJ there. So some fantastic kind of second level picks that the transition team is making, but kind of sticking to the top level cabinet level picks. I want to mention
Will Scharf because it's so funny, because I'm working on a research project right now, and a lot of it's related to lawfare, and he's been one of the real ballasts against the lawfare superstructure, and not a household name at this point. But I was literally looking at notes that I have open right now. You had no idea. I had no idea Josh going to bring up Will Scharf. I have a note I'm looking at right now. Will Scharf, a good guy. I had written down. So it's funny. So there on my screen.
Yeah, Will's been a very good friend for many years now. We came up through the same kind of conservative lawyer ecosystem there, and he's going to do fantastic work in the Trump White House. But, kind of focusing, I guess, for the more kind of household-friendly names there at the cabinet level, a bunch of names stand out. I'm a huge fan of the Pete Hegseth pick. I think Pete Hegseth's name has been dragged through the mud by this Kavanaugh-esque information operation. They're saying he's a drunkard, he's a rapist. It's basically the whole Kavanaugh operation all over again. Alex, to me, the Pentagon's number one problem, but I mean, there's a lot of excess spending there's a lot of rot, there's a lot of DEI, there's a lot of woke crap, there's Mark White Rage Milley and all that stuff. But to me, as an American patriot who kind of came of political age in the post 9/11 era and a lot of these kind of failed moralistic boondoggles overseas, when I look at the number one thing that is currently dragging down the Pentagon and the U.S. military, it's recruitment. It's the fact that the Army, Navy, and Air Force now for consecutive years have missed their recruitment targets by double-digit percentages. And what that means to me, Alex, is that if you want to start convincing young men, getting back to what we were just saying a few minutes ago, if you want to start talking about inspiring people to love their country and ultimately be willing to kind of put it all on the line, quite literally on the line, to defend their people, to defend their country, to defend their way of life, you're going to need someone young. You're going to need someone who ideally has fought in those post 9/11 wars and therefore is actually in touch with the ways that young warriors and young prospective warriors view the military, view our modern American foreign policy there. That's obviously Pete Hegseth. The guy is whip smart. They say he's quote unquote not qualified. Dude's got multiple Ivy League degrees. He's a combat veteran from both Iraq and Afghanistan, been awarded multiple Bronze Stars for his service over there. He's very telegenic. He's obviously a Fox News household name there. I'm thinking here of someone who can get on TV, look straight into the camera, and make a compelling case as to why John Smith in Kansas or New Mexico, whatever, should go to the local recruitment office and sign to join the military. I think Pete Hegseth is exactly that guy. I think it's a fantastic pick, honestly.
I've always loved this pick, but to hear you articulate it makes me love it even more. And I love these picks that Trump came up with. Some of these people where I liked it, and the more I think about it, I love it. And you're so right about this, is that the number one goal I was thinking is to drain the swamp and to get some of these wokeification, the military, to undo a lot of that. But maybe it's even more fundamental than that. Maybe it's getting non-woke people to enlist, and maybe that's really what it's about. And who's a better advertisement for that than Pete Hegseth? He's rich, he's successful, he's handsome, he's got a bunch of kids, he's got a We the People tattoo in his wrist, he has Ivy League degrees, he's served his country in combat zones. I mean, he's a stud, he's a total stud. And it's like, if you're going to want to join a military, wouldn't he be the perfect face to recruit people to it? So it's kind of a no-brainer. You think of it as the most controversial of the picks. No, it's kind of the least controversial when you really think about it. He's exactly the guy, especially on the heels of Lloyd Austin, who came from the board of Raytheon, which is the single most outrageous pick of any of the, and I'm sad to say I'm a student of the Biden administration, but I've spent way too much time thinking about his various picks, might be the worst pick of all of his picks. And Merrick Garland had no business being attorney general. He came from an office of running 9 people. He had no business running a bureaucracy. It's the who are their lowlights. I mean, Tony Blinken obviously is just trying to enrich himself. That's his whole goal, is to try to set up business deals for himself for when he gets on the outside. Pete Buttigieg has no business running transportation. That might have been the second worst. But Austin's the worst to me, because you cannot have someone coming from the defense sector straight into running the Pentagon. You cannot do that. That should have been illegal. And the fact that Hegseth considered controversial compared to that is ridiculous.
It's a very good point. I mean, let's also not forget that Lloyd Austin also had emergency surgery and didn't even tell the president of the United States that he was out of commission for like a week or two. I mean, you probably should know that your Secretary of Defense is being hospitalized. I don't remember exactly what the procedure was, but I mean, this is the kind of thing that basic military chain of command should indicate that you should probably tell your superior. You should probably tell the commander in chief. Not that this commander in chief has the mental wits about him right now, or frankly the basic functional capacity.
Yeah, but someone had to know. You do at least kind of send HR a memo. Like, by the way, from this conference call today.
I mean, I guess I'll toss out just one other name as the possible worst Biden cabinet pick, who I don't think you mentioned, which is Alejandro Mayorkas, who I believe was
you got me. He's number one.
I mean, he was the first cabinet pick who was actually impeached since like the 1870s or 1880s, if I'm not mistaken. There, I mean, so look,
he's ultimately trying to subvert the country in plain sight every day, and that's Austin. At least isn't doing that. Austin's corrupt, but there is Mayorkas, I do think, is committing treason. I really do. And I don't think I've ever said that of a public leader. I think he's actually the only one. So I don't want people to think I'm just throwing bombs here. If you look at the totality of our reporting on him at Breitbart over the last 4 or 5 years, I mean, I think it's a compelling case.
He's horrific. He's absolutely horrific. He wholly deserved to be impeached there. He probably deserved to be removed from office as well there. Unfortunately, that did not happen. But the very fact that he was the first cabinet official in basically a century and a half to actually be impeached by the U.S. House, I think says all that there is to know. I mean, look, this is a very informed audience, to put it mildly, when it comes to immigration policy. So I don't want to try to kind of just roll out statistics or anything like that. But I mean, to say that what has been happening at the southern border over the past 4 years, to call that anything other than not just a a national catastrophe, but a world historical catastrophe, I think would frankly risk understating it. I have no objection whatsoever to the use of treason or treasonous to describe Alejandro Mayorkas. Frankly, that really is kind of the ultimate criteria for trying to impeach a public official. Actually, I mean, we speak of high crimes or misdemeanors. That legal language that the founders use. I mean, Alexander Hamilton explains it in Federalist Number 65. We're not talking here about a black letter criminal code in the actual criminal code. High crimes or misdemeanors actually had a specific definition at English common law. It basically referred to what you're saying. It basically referred, as Hamilton put it in Federal 65, to a betraying of the public trust, right, which you might translate as treason, frankly.
Well, exactly right. And thank you for adding some intellectual heft to my bomb throwing claim. Josh, one of your expertise is in the Middle East and Israel. And I think it's really important to discuss the incoming administration and what this could mean for the Middle East. And I think one of the absolute best parts about Trump's campaign is he somehow positioned himself so that literally every major party, aside from actual terrorists, are excited for him to come in because unless you're a card-carrying Hamas member, you're probably open-minded that whatever scenario emerges from the Middle East when Trump's been in power for a year or two is going to be better for all sides. How did he pull this off, and what do you think should be his first 100 days priorities with regards to the Middle East?
So Trump's foreign policy from his first term, Alex, was nothing short of genius.
I have to say, I make a point to be critical of him when he deserves it. I give his foreign policy an A+. I really do. A+.
It was probably the single best part of his entire presidency, honestly. And I say that as someone who personally and professionally benefited from his judicial picks. I clerked for Judge Ho on the Fifth Circuit, who was a Trump pick there. So I literally professionally benefited from his judicial picks. And even I am saying that I think his foreign policy above all was probably the number one best thing about his first term. Not just Middle East. I'll get to Middle East in just a second there. But I mean, he also was the first president, going back to Richard Nixon visiting Chairman Mao. He was literally the first president to undo a half century, or I should say, to begin the process of undoing a half century of this bear hug relationship between the U.S. and China. Policies, by the way, which the Biden administration, I think, to their very rare credit, some of those tariff policies they actually left in place because they were so convinced that they were actually working properly there. But the Middle East probably was Trump's bread and butter above all there. And, fundamentally, I was talking maybe 15, 20 minutes ago about this kind of ancient notion of rewarding friends and punishing enemies there. That fundamentally was Donald Trump's Middle East policy. And it was an inversion of the Barack Obama status quo ante that preceded it, because Barack Obama and this new breed of woke Democrats that are basically intellectually downstream of all the horrific stuff from the 1960s Marxist Academy and the Ivory Tower onwards there, they had this ridiculous notion that a U.S. foreign policy should ultimately be about rewarding your enemies and punishing your friends. And then Donald Trump gets into office, and he's like, well, what are you talking about? I mean, this is kind of just common sense 101. I want to actually reward my friends on the world stage and punish my enemies. So what does he do? I mean, he's obviously the most pro-Israel by far president in American history. He moves the embassy. He recognizes the Golan Heights. He pulls out of the Iran deal. He recognizes that Judea and Samaria, a.k.a. the quote-unquote West Bank, is likely legal. He doesn't come out and say it's legal, but he says it's probably legal there. I could go on and on. But in addition to that, then he has this crippling Iran policy. He has the maximum pressure campaign that he works with Mike Pompeo and others with there to try to really turn the screws on the Iranian regime. They're basically on the brink of bankruptcy there. And what are the results of this? Well, I think a certain breed of foreign policy analysts would have said that the results would be chaos. You'd have Iran acting up and flaring up, and then be all these jihadists kind of running around and trying to behead people. No, honestly, the results were the exact opposite. It was generational historical peace. You have the Abraham Accords peace agreements there, which really would not have resulted were it not for this anti-Iran, pro-Israel foreign policy regime in the Middle East there. So I am really excited to see what this new Donald Trump administration can do in this part of the world, in the Middle East there. The Middle East is obviously on fire right now. You have regime change in Syria. You have Erdogan and Turkey that are on the run. You have Iran, which until very recently was starting to activate all the screws from Hezbollah to Hamas. They're starting to be a little more scared there, but you still have the Houthis in Yemen, which are acting up there. I'm very excited to see this administration come back into office and to get back to good old-fashioned foreign policy common sense, which once again is really just rewarding your friends and punishing your enemies ultimately. The big question for me, Alex, is whether or not Saudi Arabia can actually join the Abraham Accords. I think they probably will. It's a question of timing, though, because the Saudis have to be very careful about the whole situation in Gaza and whatnot. But to me, it's really just a question of not if, but when. And I think Trump is going to, I really think that he's actually going to deliver on the Saudi Arabia peace deal.
So give me your read on Biden's 11th hour moves, because it feels like everything he's doing is trying to sow maximum chaos. And I think about this because you mentioned Syria, where look, no one likes Assad. Assad's a bad guy, but there is no telling that what's going to be next is going to be any better. As a Christian, I'm very concerned about the potential for a Christian genocide there. And then Biden comes out and just takes credit for it as if he orchestrated the whole thing, which I don't know if that's true. And it just feels like maybe he's just kind of showing some bravado to Obama, who I know wanted regime change in Syria and didn't happen. But what's your read on what's happening in Syria and Biden's bizarre claim that he gets credit for it?
So I am extremely cautious and skeptical about what's happening in Syria. That was actually the column that I wrote 2 weeks ago. I said I was arguing how not to think about Syria, because I saw a lot of neoconservative triumphalists basically pounding their chests and saying, oh, freedom, liberty, Assad is gone. Assad was a bad guy. He was obviously a very bad guy. I mean, he has a personal death toll. Probably about 600,000 people. I mean, mass graves, horrific stuff. I mean, horrific stuff there. But what's happening right now, I mean, this notion that al-Jawlani, the leader of this U.S. recognized terrorist organization, HTS, the notion that he is a reformed man and that he is someone that the United States can so-called do business with, this strikes me as utter lunacy. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, this is someone who has spent his entire career as somewhat of a peripatetic jihadist, kind of wandering from place to place, kind of signing up for Al-Qaeda here, ISIS there. He's an Islamist. He is a radical Sunni Islamist. This is all being bankrolled by the Turks, by Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who I think is a generally malignant and malicious force on the world stage. If the Iranian regime actually goes down, which is possible, I mean, the Trump maximum pressure campaign almost frankly got that result the first time around. You know, Erdogan's probably going to step into the breach there. So Turkey is very much a mid to long-term strategic threat, not just to people in the Middle East, such as Israel, Saudis, Emiratis, but very much to the United States as well. The United States actually has nuclear weapons at Incirlik Air Base there in Turkey. Turkey, of course, is famously in NATO. There is no clean legal vehicle for actually expelling a NATO country. So this is a huge problem.
This is where I want to go next, because this is where become a minor obsession of mine, because I take full credit for mainstreaming the talking point that Putin would not have invaded Ukraine if not for the specter of Ukraine joining NATO, that the Biden administration was adamant to not shut down, that allowing all the NATO talks to take place, Ukraine was going to join. And so I think that's why we have the war with Ukraine and Russia right now. And so NATO, which I mean, maybe traditionally has done more good than harm, I mean, it's causing some problems right now. I think this war was on NATO, and the fact that Turkey is a NATO ally overcomplicates the situation as well. They should not be in NATO if NATO wants to be legitimate, but is NATO even legitimate? I mean, what's the future of NATO under a Trump who has been negative about it because no one pays their fair share?
I very much share your skepticism of NATO and Donald Trump's skepticism. I mean, NATO is an organization that quite literally outlived its founding purpose the year I was born. I was born in 1989. That's literally the year that the Berlin Wall came down. I mean, you know, we can quibble and call it 1991 because that's when the Russian Federation was formed of the ashes of the Soviet Union. But the point is, it has been literally 3 to 3.5 decades since NATO actually had the chance of fulfilling its purpose, because it succeeded. Its purpose was to destroy the old evil empire, as Reagan called it. And guess what? NATO won, and the evil empire, the Soviets, lost. So at this point, what does NATO stand for? I honestly, I'm not sure I could tell you, Alex. Yeah, I mean, in theory, I guess it's a Russia containment alliance. Yeah. But Russia's obviously not America's number one. Yeah, I mean, first of all, how is that going? Second of all, in many ways, it's doing more harm than good, as you suggested, because of the Ukraine war, this Turkey expel mechanism. God knows what's going on there. But most importantly, Russia is a secondary threat at this point. I mean, China is the threat, obviously. I mean, certainly. You know, talk about the need for kind of an Abraham Accord-style peace accord in the Indo-Pacific with Japan, Philippines. That is the kind of arguable kind of multilateral NATO-type thing for the 21st century that I could probably get behind there. But NATO, I mean, let the Europeans deal with that at this point. It's just not our problem. It's really not.
Amen to that. Well said. Josh, a last one for today, and we'll come back and talk some more down the road. This has been really fun. So you're at Newsweek. You've been in Newsweek for a while, and Newsweek is one of my biggest curiosities in media, but I admit not to the point where I've done a deep dive into it. But they allow for a lot of conservative voices. I don't know who the ownership is over there, but their news reporting is still not good. But it just seems like as columnists, they allow for some columnists who are pretty hip and red-pilled. And Newsweek's always a part of the show. People see with the wide shot is that my Newsweek cover where they superimpose Trump on my shoulders. It's the hip piece. I was not interviewed for the article at all. So if you want any Marlow content, it's not there. There's not one sentence of me in that, but they put that out, and I was pretty thrilled about it because it's cool. So it's on the set. But tell me, what's it like over there?
So, Alex, I've been in Newsweek now for almost 5 years, which is crazy. I mean, time truly just flies. I joined in May of 2020, so just after COVID started. So I was at the Daily Wire previous to that. And long story short, I heard through the grapevines that Newsweek was looking for a conservative to head up their opinion page. And Amazing. This was because they had some conservative columnists. So at the time, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, some people were writing columns, but they basically wanted someone to symbolically head this operation so that conservatives could kind of see that person and be like, okay, this is a safe space where I can kind of send op-eds in there. I'm not going to get smeared because so-and-so is kind of heading the operation. And, you know, my task when I was heading up the op-ed section, which I did for about 3 years from 2020 to 2023, my task was not to turn Newsweek into Breitbart or anything like that. Rather, my task was simply to platform all sides. So we did that. I mean, you know, we ran conservatives, we ran liberals. I mean, I hired
that something though. It's like the left takes over stuff. Like, we're going to shut everyone down, and a right-wing guy who, you know, comes on Breitbart podcast comes on, and he's like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to platform everyone. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? It's such a difference between us and them.
No, it totally is. And, you know, Newsweek, to their great credit, you know, the news section I don't work for, and, you know, it kind of is what it is. I guess I'll leave it at that. But the opinion section, I mean, very much is tasked with fulfilling Newsweek's literal mission statement on the website, which is that Newsweek exists to platform all sides, to kind of to give voice to the full diversity of American and global political opinion, whatnot there. So that was my job for 3 years. I've been in a separate capacity for about a year and a half now, focusing on my show and my writings and my newsletter and all that. But for 3 years, I really was tasked with giving all sides a platform at Newsweek. And look, I'm a little biased, but I think we did a pretty good job. I mean, we were routinely platforming conservative United States senators, governors, President Trump multiple times, things like that. So, you know, look, it's been a fun ride, and, you know, Newsweek is a historically liberal brand. Again, it's not Breitbart or anything like that, but it's been a very hospitable home for me, and I'm very grateful for that, frankly.
Very cool. Well, the Josh Hammer Show, Newsweek podcast, it's also on radio. What markets are you in? So in case people check that out.
So we're here in South Florida, where I live. We're in Seattle. We're in St. Louis. And within the next week or two, I guess I'll break the news to you, we're actually also joining the Dallas-Fort Worth market. Congratulations.
That's a huge market. I think that's our second biggest market at Breitbart. I think Houston and Dallas are two biggest. And then New York and LA, for all of you who think that those places must be so horrible, but still top 5 Breitbart markets. The new book coming out in March, Israel and Civilization, the fate of the Jewish nation and the destiny of the West. We'll do some stuff on that when that comes out. Josh, you should get some sleep, my friend, because I know it's going to be a sleepy time. If you're a good husband, and I'm sure you are, that you're definitely up in the middle of the night quite a bit. I always like when some of the husbands just flex it. Oh, no, my wife does all that. It's like, wow, you've got her coached up. That was not the situation in my house.
No, sleep is definitely hard to come by here in the Hammer household at this moment. But, you know, Alex, regardless of how I sound, and hopefully I didn't sound too tired on your show, but it's always a pleasure joining you, my friend. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's nice to talk to you. I'm a fan of yours, and I'll be rooting for you. And we'll check back probably in a couple months and enjoy the baby. The first month is spectacular. Every second is precious, so make sure to take all that in. Will do. God bless you. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you to producer Misty, all of you for telling 10,000 friends and family members about the Alex Marlow Show, 5-star reviews, sharing the content, subscribing. You guys know what to do. It all helps a lot. You have no idea. Aloha at alexmarlow.com. If you want to correspond with me, tell me anything you're liking, not liking, comments, questions. I'll address those at a future show. That's it for today, and we'll talk to you next time.